The movie starts with a kid named Jack. His father was a farmer. Jack loved to hear a story because his mother used to tell him this story before she died. The story was about the king named Eric who used to rule a whole country. That time, some pastors made some magical beans. They made these beans to get to heaven and talk to God. When they planted a bean on the ground, a giant tree came out of the land. The tree was so big that they couldn't see the end of that tree. The pastors thought it would take them to heaven. When they went to the top of the tree, they found out they had reached another world between heaven and earth. The name of this place was Gantua, and it was the home of giants who lived there, and they were bigger and stronger than humans. When the pastors went there, the giants saw them, and they got away to come down on earth. They came down to earth through the tree. After reaching here, they destroyed everything. They started to kill humans and stealing everything. After watching this, the king's soldier killed one of the giants, and a pastor took out his heart. After that, with the help of dark magic, he made a magical crown from the giant's heart, and when the king wore the crown on his head, all the giants kneeled before him and accepted him as their king. The king ordered them to go back to Gantua. After the giants returned to their world, the king ordered his men to cut down the tree and kept the beans to himself. When the king died, they put the beans and the magical crown in his coffin and buried them, and with time this story became a legend. When Jack was going to sleep, he asked his father if giants will ever return. His father told him that this is only a story and giants don't exist in the real world. The princess of that kingdom named Isabel also loved this story because her mom used to tell this story all the time. And her mother also told her that she is the bloodline of King Eric. Now, after 10 years, we saw that Jack had grown up and he lives with his uncle because his father has died. His uncle sends him to the city to sell the horse. When he got there, he saw that there was a play going on about the story of the king. He went inside to watch the play. Jack notices that a beautiful girl is standing in the audience. Meanwhile, some guys started to harass the girl. Jack went ahead to save her, but a guy punched him in the face. Jack threatened them, and they then kneeled before him. Jack thought that they were scared of him, and that's why they kneeled, but when he looked back, there were many soldiers behind him, and they came here to save the girl. Now Jack realized that girl was the Princess Isabel, and this was the reason for the men kneeling. So, the princess went back to the palace with them. After that, we saw a guy named Roderick. He was the fiancé of the princess. But the princess didn't like him at all, and she didn't want to marry him. When Roderick went to his study room and saw that his whole study room was destroyed, he checked all around, and he found out that the magical beans had been stolen, but the crown of King Eric was there. So, Roderick ordered his soldiers to shut the city down and arrest the pastor at any cost. When Jack was trying to sell his horse, the same pastor approached him and told him he wanted to buy his horse. Jack asked him if he had any money, but the pastor didn't have any money. That's why the pastor offered him beans as collateral and told him about the abbey where he could exchange the beans for cash. Jack asked him why anyone would give him money for some beans. The pastor said these are not any ordinary beans, these are magical beans. These beans have the power to change the world, and they are priceless. He also warns him not to lose the beans or get them wet. After saying this, the pastor left with Jack's horse. Before he could escape, he got arrested by soldiers. When Jack came back home, his uncle was mad at him for exchanging the horse for some beans. He told him that he had to grow up and how the pastor fooled him. Jack's uncle became so mad that he threw those beans and told Jack that now he had to sell the things of Jack's parents. Jack began to pick up the beans, but one bean fell through the wooden hole, and he didn't notice it. That night, it was raining outside, and Jack was worried about his uncle. Because the princess didn't want to marry Roderick, she was running away from the palace. To save herself from the heavy rain, the princess went to Jack's house. He let her inside, and they started to talk to each other. Meanwhile, the ground of the house started to fill with water, and it was getting closer to the magical bean. As soon as the water droplet touched the bean, it began to sprout under the house. Jack and the princess were talking about the adventures inside the house. Suddenly the house began to shake, and the tree began to grow right there. Since the tree was under the house, it took the house by itself, and we noticed that the princess was still in the house. Jack tried to save her, but the house kept getting elevated higher and higher. But Jack fell down from the tree, but somehow, he survived. The next morning the king came there, and Jack told him everything. The king ordered his soldiers to go up and save his daughter. Roderick said that he would also go there to save the princess. Jack also wanted to go with them, and they took him with them. When they were climbing the tree, then Roderick cut the rope intentionally, and some soldiers fell down and died. Now we realized that he was up to something. Finally, they reached Gantua. After reaching there, Roderick told Jack that he knows that Jack has those magical beans. He ordered Jack to give him those beans. Jack didn't want to give him the beans, but Roderick threatened him. So, Jack gave him the seeds, but somehow he managed to steal a bean from the pouch. After that, they divided into 3 teams and started to look for the princess. Suddenly a giant came in front of Jack and his team, and he took 2 of Jack's team members with him. But Jack followed the giant because he wanted to find the princess at any cost. He knew that the best way to find the princess was to follow a giant. After that, the movie shifted towards Roderick and his team members. Roderick pushed one of his team members from the cliff because he didn't like him. But then suddenly a giant came in front of them and killed Roderick's friend. The giant was about to kill Roderick as well, but Roderick pulled out the magical crown. He wore the crown on his head and went to the city where giants live. The princess was also there, along with a soldier. We noticed that all the giants kneeled before Roderick, and now he was the king of the giants. Roderick asked the general of the giants to kneel before him, as well he went to the throne. Roderick announced that I am your king from now on, and we will take over the earth. He ordered them to prepare for battle. Meanwhile, a giant took the soldier and the princess to the kitchen. He was about to cook the soldier, but then Jack came there. Before the giant could kill the soldier, Jack somehow managed to kill the giant and saved the soldier's life. After that, Jack, the princess and the soldier went outside, and they were about to go down to earth. But a giant was guarding that place. Jack said that they should wake him up with a beehive. They put the beehive into the mask of that giant, and the giant stood up and began to shake and scream in pain. The giant lost its balance and fell over the edge. The king saw the giant and realized that the legends were true. That's why he ordered his soldiers to cut the tree. Because if those giants came to earth, then they would destroy everything, and no one would be able to stop them. Now the soldier told Jack and the princess to go down, and he would stay here to take care of Roderick. Because if he gets down, he will destroy everything. Jack and the princess started to go down using the tree. The king didn't want to cut the tree because his daughter was still up there. But with a heavy heart, he ordered to cut it because he knew it was the right thing to do. On the other side, Roderick was preparing to go to Earth with the army of giants. The soldier was hiding there at the edge, and he attacked Roderick and killed him. On the other side, we saw that the soldier successfully managed to cut the tree. The tree began to fall, and the soldier managed to jump on the tree. Jack and the princess were also falling with the tree, but luckily, they managed to survive. Meanwhile, the general of giants took the crown and put it on as a ring. Therefore, the giants made him their king, but now they could not get to Earth because the soldiers cut down the tree. Suddenly they found a tiny pouch, and those magical beans were inside this pouch. The giants dropped those beans into the water, and some huge trees started to grow out of the ground. They bent the trees towards the earth and began their journey towards the earth. Now we saw that, after getting his daughter back, the king was very happy. He thanked Jack for saving his daughter's life. Jack said goodbye to the princess and left. When Jack was going towards his house, he saw that those giants had come down to earth. Jack immediately went towards the palace to inform the king about it. He also told the pastor to ring the bell. The giants had come down to earth and started to kill king's men, and they created chaos. The king and soldiers rushed toward the palace to save their life because it was the only safe place for them. Because they were the bloodline of King Eric, and that's why the giants wanted to kill them all. Before the giants could kill them, they went inside the palace, but Jack was left behind. One soldier ordered to pull up the bridge, but before the bridge got closed, Jack jumped onto the bridge at the right time, but the general of the giants grabbed the bridge with his hand. The soldiers started to fire at him. The giant fell to the water with hot oil in it and burnt badly. But he managed to survive. Then he went underwater to look for another way. The giant started to throw trees at the palace. And the bridge was about to get closed, but the giants were trying to open it with ropes. After this, a giant threw a big bell towards the wall, and the wall broke into pieces. After watching this, the king realized that it is impossible to stop them. The king told the princess to go to his chamber and light the beacon. So that everyone would know that we are in danger. That's why Jack and the princess went ahead to light the beacon. When they moved towards the light beacon, and they saw King Eric's grave. Suddenly the ground started to crack because the giant's general who fell in the water had come here inside the palace. After coming out of the ground, the giant attacked them, and he managed to capture the princess. The giant was about to swallow Jack, but Jack pulled out the last magical bean and threw it inside the giant's mouth. After that, the giant swallowed the seed. We saw that the bean began to sprout in his stomach, and as a result, his body got ripped into tiny pieces. As pieces of giant fall around Jack and Isabel, his hand with crown fell beside Jack. On the other side, all of the giants entered the palace. The king, with his soldiers, was standing in front of them. But suddenly, all the giants dropped their weapons and kneeled before the king. When they looked back, they saw that Jack was standing there wearing the crown, and Isabel took his hand into her hand. And then he ordered all the giants to go back to their world. After that, we saw Jack and the princess married, and Jack was telling the same story to his children, just like he used to hear from his dad. The kids asked him about the crown, and he replied that the crown is safe. Now we saw that the crown was being reconstructed and crafted into the imperial state crown. Now, the movie turns towards the modern age, where a guide tells some students about the crown. It is held in Westminster Abbey in London. The film ends here with this scene.